The country faces several economic challenges over the coming years, and most of the rich developed economies face broadly similar ones. Though this country is better positioned than most countries to face them, the economic road ahead will not be completely smooth. This is Canada, the world's second biggest country. Situated directly above the United States on the North American continent, it is surrounded on all three sides by the Atlantic, Arctic, and Pacific Oceans, with a border that stretches over 8,891 kilometers, or 5,525 miles. Between them, Canada and the U.S. have the longest shared border in the world. The topography of Canada is even more remarkable because within 100 miles of the U.S. border, 80% of all Canadians reside. In fact, 50% of all Canadians dwell just south of this line. This province of Canada, Ontario, accounts for 38% of the Canadian GDP. Most people tend to live in areas where economic activities are available. That is why the largest industries in Canada, real estate, mining, and manufacturing, are mostly located in these provinces. In many ways, the Canadian economy is doing well. The unemployment rate is near its record low. 830,000 more Canadians are employed compared to when COVID-19 first hit, and Canada's economic growth was the strongest in the G7 over the last year. At the same time, many Canadians are faced with real affordability challenges and are feeling the effects of higher grocery prices and housing costs. Since the financial crisis, house prices in Canada have doubled. This housing boom is spurred by consumer spending. In 2009, Canadians were urged to take on debt in order to purchase homes by the government's stimulus program and the central bank's interest rate, which was close to 1%. Either out of dread or hope that prices will continue to rise, people are buying. Rising interest rates over the past year have temporarily lowered house costs, but most Canadian renters still believe that owning a home may be out of reach. In fact, 63% of Canadians who don't own a home have given up on ever doing so. These findings come from an Ipsos survey. According to a report by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, immigration has been a significant driver of rental demand in recent years. Initially, many immigrants to Canada choose to rent rather than buy a home, which supports the demand for rental properties. It's not just Canada. In comparison to rentals in the most industrialized countries, such as the US and UK, which seem decently priced, house prices likewise appear too much. The consumers in Canada, whose capacity for borrowing and spending may be approaching its limit, are what set the Canadian home market apart. Investment capital is allocated to homes by Canadians more so than to enterprises. Business investment. In this case, it's a combination of non-residential structures, machinery and equipment, and intellectual property, which together add up to only 9.3% of GDP. On the other hand, strong growth in housing investment pushed Canada's net stock of residential assets up 18.9%, representing 22% of national wealth. As a percentage of GDP, Canada actually spends less on business. Both domestic and foreign individuals invest in businesses. Foreign direct investment, primarily from the United States, makes up Canada's lower level of domestic investment. Canadian businesses don't always wow the world. Canadians are less willing to take risks than their relatives south of the border, according to a poll of 900 executives. At a time of strain in Canada's partnership with America, the fact that 6 of the 10 top firms in the world based on revenue are either American or Chinese is no longer considered acceptable. In contrast, the top Canadian finance manager, Brookfield Asset Management, is placed only 158th. The United States has an impact on a few of Canada's economy's distinctive features. Canada has shaped its economic policies and practices in reaction to the impact of its southern neighbor, the United States, given its proximity and close economic ties. For example, American companies have established business operations in Canada primarily to avoid tariffs or taxes, but headquarters and intellectual property often stay south. Many new and exciting startups in Canada are being acquired by foreign companies, especially American ones. This is partially due to the fact that small Canadian businesses forfeit their tax advantages when they go public and sell shares on the stock market. These businesses are therefore more susceptible to being bought up by bigger international corporations. Because of all of this, the economy is no longer as inventive and productive as that of America. To put the disparity in perspective, the average annual salary for Canadians is approximately $60,000, while that of Americans is almost $80,000. In other words, by traveling just a few hours south, incomes increase almost 33% on average. Americans work more hours than Canadians, about 3.5% more. While the average American worker produces $1.74 of value per hour, the average Canadian worker produces just $1.57 of value per hour. What enables Americans to work not harder but rather smarter than Canadians? So what does contribute to the gap? The biggest factor is the notable difference in the amount spent or invested on machines, tools, innovation, and capital per worker. What economists call capital intensity. Canadian businesses spent about $13,000 per worker on capital, while their U.S. counterparts spent $20,500. Canada also spent very little on research and development among G7 countries. According to the World Intellectual Property Organization, the U.S. produces roughly double the number of patents per person than Canada. Productivity growth is directly related to improved standards of living or income per person. After adjusting for purchasing power parity, Canada's per capita income in 2023 was $59,813, which was around $7,708 less than that of the U.S. Because of lower levels of inequality, Canadians at the lowest half of the income scale are better off than Americans in their situation. So far, this disparity has not been a major issue. The income disparities in any given nation are evaluated using a metric known as the Gini coefficient. Perfect equality is represented by a 0 Gini coefficient, while perfect inequality is represented by a 1. In the past 42 years, Canada's Gini coefficient has never surpassed that of the United States. Inequality in the U.S. has always been higher than in Canada, and in fact has risen faster for the entirety of those 42 years. In Canada, after increasing sharply during the difficult period in the early to mid-1990s, income inequality has remained essentially flat over the last decade and fell after 2010. However, the Canadian economy remains less competitive compared to other developed economies. According to the IMD World Competitiveness Ranking, Canada ranks 14th out of 63 countries, its worst performance in the annual survey's history, which dates back to 1997. About 10 to 15 years ago, Canada was really innovative, despite facing stiff competition from larger and better-funded rivals. To stay competitive, Canada needs to be more innovative and creative, and it can achieve this goal because it has some of the most skilled and talented people from around the world. This is corroborated by the IMD report, which indicates that Canada is ranked 11th in the world for talent. But if you don't use your gift for your country's sake, what good is it? Talented individuals are migrating south of the border in search of more lucrative salaries. It's referred to as brain drain. In comparison to several countries, Canada has historically had fewer government measures to support researchers or businesses. The truth is that investment in other industries, such as manufacturing, research, and commercial operations, has been stifled by Canada's reliance on natural resources for economic growth. Canada has been a natural resource economy. Its primary economic activity revolves around mining, lumber, oil, and natural gas. In 2021, natural resources directly or indirectly accounted for 17% of nominal GDP, and they comprised 51% of the value of Canada's total merchandise exports. However, Canada's two biggest exports, oil and vehicles, are both declining and may continue to do so. Oil from Alberta's tar sands is expensive to produce, and the United States, which is by far its biggest foreign customer, is producing more of its own oil than importing. Car making has never fully recovered from the 2008 recession. Production has dropped from a peak of 3 million vehicles in 1999 to 1.4 million in 2020. That leaves room for growth in the thriving services sector. The real estate, financial services, and communications sectors have all experienced substantial growth in recent years. With one of the biggest concentrations of financial services business headquarters in the Americas, Toronto is quickly emerging as a major financial hub in North America. Additionally, Canada's banking system continues to lead the G7 for the 11th consecutive year, and is among the safest in the world. Many may doubt that. However, Canada weathered the global financial crisis better than the United States, partly due to its banks' conservative management, strict regulations, and lack of issues with overzealous competition. Canada's economy is still among the strongest in the world despite all of its issues. Its people are courteous and self-assured. Its democratic government is stable. Its business climate is favorable, and it is thought to be among the least corrupt nations in the world. However, growth has not been as strong as other advanced economies for a long time, and according to the OECD's predictions, it is unlikely to improve anytime soon. And there you have it, folks, a comprehensive journey through the highs and lows of Canada's economic landscape. From its resilient banking sector to the shifting tides of its resource exports, Canada's economy is a dynamic tapestry of innovation and adaptation. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.